Yeah, this is actually a pretty good observation by Cool Dude. Tucker must be pretty clued in, or have people who work for him who are to interview Isker. Not throwing shade at Isker, just saying he's not a massive e-celeb or something.
Oh no,
Yeah,
no,
that's
you
why I
get it.
think he what?
He that completely gets it. Like
Yes,
there's
that's why I think he's going to talk about dispensationalism. Just saying. That's why. And actually, let's kind of end here. So I've had a lot of frustrations with dispensationalism in debates lately. I'm not going to tell the personal backstory to this, but dispensationalists represent the debate as being about hermeneutics. And I think this is just a complete lie. It's a fallacy because claim that they read the Bible literally, that they take the Bible the most seriously, which is a good sales pitch for dispensationalism, but it's not the reality of the situation. They go into scripture having a certain belief about Israel that they then read into scripture, um, which they then use as a lens to read scripture with. And that is not a correct hermeneutic. Reading scripture literally, as the dispensationalists otherwise say, will naturally lead to a non-dispensationalist out view. So, you're going to read Galatians and not come away thinking that modern Israel has any significance.
yeah. I mean, again, or you'll read Peter saying you are a chosen nation or chosen race, which is directly quote or chosen race of priest, which is a
Or
direct quote from Deuteronomy.
and then you'll read Deuteronomy 28 and yes, this was already fulfilled. Jeremiah already fulfilled. So, and that's what the land promises were already fulfilled in is it first or second Kings 4:21 that talks about the land that under Solomon they got from the border of Egypt to the Euphrates River under their control. But dispensationalists are like that wasn't really the fulfillment of the land promise. And they just move the goalpost on what the Bible describes. Is that the Bible? First of all, I think the Kings, because it was originally one work, maybe in two scrolls, but that author clearly viewed Solomon's reign as the fulfillment of the land promise, because they also talk about the number of Judah being the sand in the sea. So the Bible believed that the land promises were already fulfilled. The Bible believes that the return promise was already fulfilled because they returned from exile. That's what the return promises are.
Also, the temple the
So
reconstructed.
Deuteronomy 30 is about the return from exile.
Also,
That was fulfilled.
the reconstructed temple is not a third temple; it's the second temple that was not built when Ezekiel wrote his prophecy.
Because Ezekiel's a contemporary of Jeremiah and Daniel, as I understand it.
Yeah.
Daniel being
For
super
what?
old.
So
So,
what first century Jew, again in the time of Christ, would have interpreted the scroll of Ezekiel to refer to a future temple that was not the current one that was there? Like that magnificent Herod's temple. They would no, they would have thought Herod's temple was the promise,
and that's the
and that
frustration
they
is,
and the Pharisees probably believed that they were the guardians of that prophecy.
yeah, and that's my frustration with dispensationalists. They move the goalposts on biblical prophecy to say, no, this wasn't fulfilled then because Israel didn't have sovereignty. It's like, yes, they did. The Maccabees were sovereign. They were an independent kingdom. So you can't even say that modern Israel counts because they have sovereignty when the Maccabees were a Jewish state and had sovereignty. So it's just they move the goalpost, or actually it's the return from exile doesn't count because they didn't have sovereignty. And it's like modern Israel does count because they had sovereignty. It's like the Maccabees had sovereignty, which was in the middle of those two
Well,
events
again, it's
before Christ.
again, the Bible would consider the sovereignty to have continued on even in exile, even in under occupation, because again, it says that the scepter shall not depart from Judah nor any man in his lineage until Shiloh comes. Shiloh being Christ, that's obvious. So that's a prophecy that's fulfilled in
So
Christ's first advent.
that's my frustration with dispensationalism lately. They frame it as a hermeneutics debate, but if you use what they say their hermeneutics method is, you won't come away with the dispensationalist reading of the text, uh, because their actual hermeneutic method is a system of Israel versus the church, and they believe that Israel and the church are separate and not a continuation of the people of God. They don't believe in a continuation of the people of God. They bifurcate the people of God. And ultimately, dispensationalism proper teaches that Jews and Gentiles will be separated in the kingdom, in the millennial kingdom, because they have to be premillennialist. Uh, they'll be separated, and some would even go so far as to say that the Gentile believers will serve the Jewish believers
I mean,
in
keep in
heaven,
mind that actually
which
is that
that's
is
not
the
Hagee.
but that's the eschatological belief
That is that
of
is
Jewish. That's
dispensationalism.
Jewish, but
Yeah,
that's Jewish eschatology. Is that, or I
that
guess more or
that's
less, is that the Gentiles
dispensationalism
will serve
proper.
them. That's what they believe. Like that's what Martin Luther talks about. That's
And then apparently it's called progressive dispensationalism if you say that Jews and Gentiles won't be distinguishable in the millennial kingdom. That's called progressive dispensationalism,
which I think is
which
like
they view as a compromise.
isn't that a rise in the '90s too? Like
I don't know. Like, I had to review my theology textbook after hearing a dispensationalist denounce um, progressive dispensationalism, but could not answer the question as to what is the dispensationalist view on the millennial kingdom when, according to systematic theology, which is not a dispensational, Wayne Grudem, for instance, he frames the issue as what is the church, and dispensationalists frame it as a hermeneutics debate. And then, but Wayne Grudem talked about what progressive versus, I guess, traditional
I thought they called it
dispensationalists
classical,
believe.
but yes,
Classical, yeah. So he talked about that, and this dispensationalist could not answer that question about what their view was about Jewish and Gentile believers in the millennial kingdom, and yet that he denounced progressive dispensationalism, but apparently the only difference that Wayne Grudem talks about is the millennial kingdom part and the role of Gentiles and Jews.